All right, I think we'll get going. My name's Ian Scarrett, and I'd like to welcome everyone to our monthly webinar. Today, we're going to be doing an introduction to FlowForge, and I'm thrilled to have Nick O'Leary, who's the FlowForge CTO and co-creator of NodeRED to join us. Just a few things about the webinar before we get going. We are recording this webinar, so we'll send a recording out to everyone who registered so you can view it at a later point and share it with your colleagues. We will have lots of time at the end of Nick's demo and presentation for questions. What I do suggest is you use the Q&A pod at the bottom of your screen to ask the questions. That makes it a lot easier for us to kind of go through the questions. Typically, things get lost in the chat, so try not to ask the questions in the chat for that. And so without further ado, I'm going to kind of turn it over to Nick, and he's going to take us through the FlowForge platform. So Nick, over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ian. Let me just get ourselves moved over. There we are. So yes, this is our webinar, basically an introduction to what we're doing here at FlowForge. I'm Nick O'Leary, CTO of FlowForge, co-founder, the co-creator of NodeRED. So I'm going to work on a basis that a lot of you will already know what NodeRED is, but I won't take that for granted. So I do say in the chat, if you're new to the NodeRED world, always helps just to know how much time I should spend just giving some of the context of what NodeRED's about. But the bit about me, who you don't know me, so I co-created NodeRED 10 years ago now, just over 10 years ago now, as it was a tool to help us do the job we were doing in our emerging technologies group, to really easily start wiring sensors together and start moving the data around, doing interesting things with it, and very quickly turned into something we thought, wow, there's some real value here, and we got all the OKs we needed to build it as an open source project. So in 10 years ago, this September is when the NodeRED open source project launched. And that's really what started the whole ball rolling. So over those 10 years, the NodeRED has turned from what was a little side project, a super useful tool for what we were doing, to something that has really been embraced by such a large community of developers, of engineers, of home automation enthusiasts across the board. So really, it's become super popular. Some of the reasons for why it's become so popular, some of the points here, being an open project, it's open source. Anyone can contribute nodes to our palette of capabilities. It isn't a walled garden. In fact, it breaks down those walled gardens. It can make it super easy to start accessing data from wherever it might be. It makes it super easy to start combining streams of data in new and interesting ways. Because so often in IoT, industrial IoT, I mean, the real value ultimately is what knowledge you can get from the data you've got. But how do you get that data? How do you build that knowledge? How do you start turning it into something you can do something with, turn it into actual information? The low code aspect of NodeRED. So for those who haven't seen it, you will get to see it a bit later on, but it's all about low code. So it's building applications in a drag and drop style. And when we talk about applications, we're not talking about building like UIs. It's about essentially drawing a flow chart of when this event happens, what should happen next, and building up an application in this concept of flows of information. And that visual nature makes it really accessible to a very broad range of people. You don't have to be a software developer to be able to build really meaningful applications in NodeRED. And again, feeding back to a lot of the success of the NodeRED project has been a lot of the people who have come to NodeRED and have stuck around with it has been, they are people who understand the problems they want to solve, but perhaps aren't the code developers, traditional lines of code developer, to build the application to solve those problems. Whereas with NodeRED, it's so much more accessible. It's a higher abstraction, if you like. So you don't have to worry about the details of how the data was pulled from a device. You just know we're getting data from that device. I can now build my application to do something with it. So it's a much broader audience than traditional programming platforms. And that's true of low code across the board. But I think it's this combination of open source with low code that has really helped NodeRED flourish. The NodeRED open source community is ever growing. It's always blows my mind whenever we come to update these numbers. So I mentioned the nodes that the community can write. The nodes represent the functionality, what you can connect to, what you can do with it. As of earlier today, there's 4,300, over 4,300 nodes published to the community library, and that number just keeps rising. And that's been one of the big success stories of NodeRED. Is we didn't build it as a closed platform that you could only talk to the systems that we say you can talk to. We built it as a platform to build on and extend, and that's really what we've seen happen. You can see the stats there for the NodeRED website. The Docker pools, I mean, huge numbers going on there. The one that always blows my mind is the NodeRED discussion forum, which we get over 1 million page views a month on there. There's always, there's dozens of discussions going on there all the time. And it's, I've worked hard, we as a community have worked hard to try and keep it a very open, welcoming community. So, there are people asking, the very detailed technical, deep in the weeds type questions, but you've also got people, they've just started using it, just want to get going. And everyone is welcome, and everyone is helped by a fantastic community we've got there. And I mentioned, NodeRED is super widely used. Obviously, quite aligned in the IoT space, but we certainly see lots of people using it well beyond that. There's a huge use in the home automation space, using it as sort of a companion to Home Assistant, another popular open source project, as well as just as a standalone thing. We see lots more in the industrial and in the commercial space. Tons of companies are turning to NodeRED and looking for ways to bring NodeRED into their environments, into their factories, into their offices. And building real solutions across a whole range of domains, RPA, the robotic process automation, data integration. I mean, such a common use case is, I just need a dashboard showing me the current state of my system. And NodeRED makes it super easy just to pull that together, throw some numbers, throw some charts on a page. And if you need to tweak it, you can just rewire your flows just to get some new data sources coming in, whatever it might be. And that's such a common use case we see, and it's great. It's awesome. But having said everything's awesome, and it is. There's certainly spaces where we see some challenges when you want to go beyond just an individual using NodeRED, where you want to go from the one to the many. Particularly in more commercial and industrial settings, you start having to ask some questions around, and this isn't limited by any means to NodeRED. This is true of any technology that a company wants to adopt. There's standard questions that people need to ask. How can you secure it? How can you manage it at scale? If you want to manage it on lots of devices, so it's not just a single instance, you might have a dozen. What are the workflows? How can I manage that? How can I share interesting flows and configurations that I've got in my applications so that they're easily reusable? Again, it's all these sorts of questions when you're scaling from just one person on one Raspberry Pi to a factory with perhaps 100 instances of NodeRED, all needing to be coordinated and managed. And then one of the big things we're looking at, and I'm going to spend a bit more time with this, is around DevOps. And that's kind of the theme of the webinar, and it's the kind of the theme of what we look at with FlowForge is in traditional code development, lines of codes, programming environments. DevOps has been around for a long time, and there are a lot of practices that are almost second nature to people working in those environments. Being able to develop in one environment, test it before deploying to production. You don't edit code in production. Well, not if you want to. Not unless you really have to, and no one really wants to. But what are the practices around if you want to have that development environment, production environment? NodeRED by itself, it's super easy to import and export flows. You copy around the JSON, but that's a very manual process, and you don't really want to get into the game of having to make sure you don't accidentally paste the wrong thing from your clipboard and deploy yesterday's version of code or whatever it might be, or the wrong code entirely from a completely unrelated system. So these are some of the aspects and the feedback we've been hearing over a period of time around some of the challenges of how you can then scale up NodeRED. And there's also the simple fact of a key strength of NodeRED is it's an open source project, and it's there for anyone to contribute to and everyone to benefit from. But that can be an impediment to commercial adoption for the companies who say, well, if we're going to build our production system reliant on this technology, they need someone that they can phone up when there is a problem, or if there is a problem, or something unexpected happens, all that sort of stuff. With open source, absolutely, you can raise the issue, you can help get it fixed, but that approach doesn't always work and isn't always appropriate in a commercial setting when your production system is down and you need to be able to get it going again as quickly as possible. So, for all we do in the open source community to be responsive to issues and to try and keep things moving forward, it is one of those impediments, as I said, not specific to NodeRED, but sort of a common theme around any technology that someone wants to adopt. So this is kind of the space that FlowForge is here to address. I started FlowForge almost exactly 2 years ago, as basically all of that stuff I've just been talking about, all of those challenges around managing NodeRED at scale and all those concerns that are kind of outside of the core of NodeRED, but how you manage NodeRED at scale. It felt like there's an opportunity here, or there's a common set of problems that need solving here. And this is what's sort of born FlowForge. And what we're building with FlowForge is a way to manage NodeRED at scale. But we want to be able to support, well, as it says there, we want people using FlowForge to be able to reliably deliver their NodeRED applications with confidence. We want a lot of the DevOps practices. So make it simple to have continuous deployment from your development environment all the way through to your production environment. We want it to be collaborative. So have multiple users be able to work together on those flows. Things that NodeRED can do today already. You can have multiple users. We recognize there's some friction when you want two people editing at the same time. But also just the simple thing of having a team of who's allowed to edit what, what access control have you got? And this comes to the secure aspect. You want to have appropriate controls. When you look at all the security standards, like ISO 27001, SOC 2, whatever it might be, there's some pretty stringent requirements around just who do you let deploy to production, who's allowed to edit your systems. So it's those sort of things. Again, NodeRED has got access control and all that sort of stuff. But when you've got 100 instances, you need to be able to centrally manage that. And you want to be able to have confidence that not only have you got access control, but you also have a clear sense of who's doing what and when. So yeah, learning from DevOps, as I said, that these are all very common practices in the in sort of well, what's the opposite of low code? High code, messy code? I don't know. Lines of code development practices. Yeah, we want to help people automate their software development lifecycle. We want to improve collaboration, communication in the system. We want to help companies continuously improve their practices around how they build their applications. And we want to try and remove the overhead of what it takes to make a change. So you're not having to copy and paste JSON all over the place, that you can make smaller changes more easily, particularly when you're thinking of the whole sort of DevOps cycle. So when we think about this in the context of NodeRED, as I say, I've talked through these a bit already. We want to make it easier to collaborate in NodeRED, both in terms of that sort of real-time experience. And although that's not something we have, that is very much in the roadmap, something we can touch on later. But yeah, improving collaboration, improving having sort of team-based assets that you can more easily reuse across your applications. We want to have a more streamlined delivery process. So how you can take snapshots of your application to have some version control of your system. How you can manage both NodeRED running within the FlowForge platform, but also the devices running outside of it. And also building a platform that's flexible. So you can either use the FlowForge Cloud that we host, or you can self-host it for yourself. The options are there. And then also, recognize we want to be recognized as experts in NodeRED. Clearly, I'm the co-creator. I know a thing or two about it, but also in the team, we've plucked people who have joined us from the NodeRED community with a deep history in the project. So, I think there's that brings a lot of value to thinking about how we're building this. We're building this with real users, with people experienced in NodeRED who really know NodeRED back to front, actually helping build the right set of solutions. So if we look at what is the platform of FlowForge, and it's a little abstract, and we're gonna, I'm not going to test you on it, but just to start introducing some of the terms and the concepts we have. So FlowForge is an open source project. You can go and download it and run the community edition for yourself. You can self-host that just running locally as just as a node application running on your local machine. You can run it in a Docker environment. You can run it in a Kube environment, Kubernetes. And from that, of course, you can then run that in public cloud hosted environments. We ourselves run an instance of our own software, which is the FlowForge Cloud, which is a place where you can come and actually sign up to get an account on our instance of FlowForge and start creating NodeRED instances for yourself in our managed instance of it. So that's kind of the hosting of the how and where it runs. And what do you actually get? Well, you know what, we're going to switch to the demo in a second. It's probably best to get into that side of things to help bring some reality to what I'm talking to you about. But the top level concept is an application. And within that application, you can have one or more NodeRED instances. And those instances can all run, that's not multiple copies of the same thing. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. But if you could think of your application as being made up of one or more NodeRED applications or NodeRED instances, each running their own flows, that you can then start building a DevOps pipeline between those instances. So within your application, you might have your development instance, your testing instance, and your production instance. And then FlowForge will help you build the sort of the pipeline so that you can, with one or two clicks, move flows from one instance to the other when they're ready to be done. And then we have the devices. So you can connect devices to your application and actually assign a device to a specific NodeRED instance. And what the platform will then do is whenever you create a snapshot of that instance, you can say, deploy this snapshot out to my devices, and it will automatically get pushed out to all of the devices connected to that NodeRED instance and start running those flows on the device. So that makes it super easy to then, for example, develop in the cloud, and when you're happy, take a snapshot and push it out to all of your devices. And when we talk to device, really we mean a NodeRED instance running outside of the platform. It could literally be a Raspberry Pi or some Linux device running our device agent. It could just as easily be a server in the corner of the factory running a much larger workload than maybe just a device. But for us, this is how we distinguish it. Devices run outside of the platform, and then we've got our applications and instances that run inside the platform. Okay, so I'm going to switch to a demo, a live demo. This is not pre-recorded, so everyone. Well, let's just hope everything behaves itself doing live demos on the internet. So this is running on FlowForge Cloud. I was debating whether to run it on my locally hosted instance, but no, we're going to go. This is what you can do today if you sign up to FlowForge Cloud. I will just ask, Ian, this might be an opportunity just to segue if there are any relevant questions that have cropped up that, before I dive into the specifics of the demo.
There's one, but I think it's best to leave it for later.
Okay.
But yeah, let's get into the demo, and I think that'll certainly generate lots of questions.
Okay. Let me just have a sip. And we're going to crack right on. So when you log in to FlowForge, you arrive in your team. So teams are how we organize users within the platform. At the moment on FlowForge Cloud, I'm in two teams. I'm in our company team, which has got lots of NodeRED instances running, lots of useful stuff for our company. And I've got my personal team. And at the moment, it's just me. So what I could do is come along to the members section, and I can come along and just invite other users to join me in this team. I haven't got anyone lined up to do it. I just thought I'd mention it, but that's not going to happen because I haven't got anyone set up to join me live on this demo. But the point being, this is our team. It's who can we collaborate with, and the users in the team can be owners, members, or just viewers, giving them different levels of access to what we're creating. But really, you want to see, well, how do we get started with NodeRED? Well, we click Create Application. So this is how we can start building our application. We generate a random name, but you can give it whatever name you want. We're going to go for a small instance in this, and then I get to pick what version of NodeRED. And I'm going to stick with 3.02, although you can see we have got the 3.10 beta 2 at the moment. And then just confirm the charges, and I hit create. So this is now creating my application and creating an instance of NodeRED within that application. So here we have the application and its list of instances. We've just got the one, so we're just going to go have a look at my dull Arctic tern. So in the background, this is now creating a new container. It's spinning up NodeRED, and whilst we're waiting for that, in fact, we can go to NodeRED logs, and you can see we're getting the logs from NodeRED. So it is starting up, and there we are, started flows. So if I come back to the overview in a few seconds, there we are. The editor URL has appeared because it is now in running state. So I can click on there, and here we have dull Arctic tern. And for those who know NodeRED, here we have NodeRED 3.0. So this is NodeRED, if you know it, that you know and love. You can just start building flows. So if you've not seen NodeRED, it is you've got the nodes down the left-hand side, which represent all the bits of functionality. You drag them into the workspace, and you can start dragging wires between them. You hit deploy, and whenever you hit deploy, that flow is now running in the NodeRED runtime. This is the typical inject debug node. So inject, I can manually inject messages. Debug causes them to appear over in this right-hand side. There's lots. I could spend a whole hour demoing NodeRED itself, but I think a lot of you here are probably more interested in the NodeRED, the FlowForge aspects of it. So let's keep things moving along. So for this demo, I'm going to add an MQTT in node. So this is a node, it subscribes to an MQTT broker. I am going to subscribe to the test mosquito, just a simple feed of data that I set up a short while ago that is running from NodeRED. So this is, let's imagine this is a temperature sensor that I've got connected to this NodeRED instance. And you can see over in the sidebar, every, I think it's, how many seconds did I set it to? 5 seconds. It's just publishing a random number. Let's pretend this is a temperature coming from a device. So that's handy. It's doing a thing. Let's say, okay, we're happy with that. Let's take a snapshot of this project because it's now doing something useful. So coming back to the dashboard, I can come to the snapshot tab. We're going to say first set of flows, and I'm just going to create a snapshot. So that's now taken a copy of the flows, the credentials, the full, all the settings of that NodeRED instance running, which, yeah, it's a snapshot. That's what it does. So at this point, it's not super interesting. What I'm actually going to do is go and create a second application. Now, at the moment, I've been talking about how applications can have multiple NodeRED instances. Being able to add a second instance is actually something that's coming in a couple of weeks' time. So at the moment, each application can only have one instance inside it, but that's just a point in time thing. So I've created a second application with its own instance. And again, we're just waiting for that to start up. And that's now started. It's running. So now we can open that one up as well. Okay, so now we've got 2 NodeREDs running in FlowForge Cloud. And turn that off. Right. So here's our first one, which is subscribe to the temperature, and it's just passing it to debug. I think what we might do here is say, well, let's imagine we want these 2 NodeREDs to start working together, that perhaps we want to, one NodeRED could be running gathering sensor data, as this one is. Maybe it wants to pass that data, share that data with the other NodeRED instances I've got in my environment. So this is one of the features we provide in the catalog are our project nodes. So the project nodes let you pass messages between NodeRED instances without having to worry about lots of configuration. So what I'm going to do is configure this project out node, and I'm going to send it to a specified other project. And we're in dull Arctic tern. I'm going to send it to my other one, different lanceolated warbler. The names are all based on European birds. It was a random choice we made last year to use that as our catalogue of safe terms. So I'm going to send this message that I'm getting from a public MQTT broker, and I'm going to pass it round to my other NodeRED instances running in FlowForge Cloud. And I'm telling it to actually pass it to this specific application. So I'm going to deploy that. Now, if I come in here, I can add a project in Node, and it's a temperature. So it's receiving messages sent to this instance. We also have this broadcast mode where something could publish a message to lots of different instances, but no, we're doing sort of point-to-point messaging here. And it was the temperature topic. And again, let's add a debug node, deploy it. And then here you can now see in the debug sidebar, every 5 seconds, we are getting the messages. So just to recap, these are messages coming from an MQTT topic. This could be any sort of data source, gathering data. We are then passing it between the NodeRED instances. So let's just, for example, we could add a function. Let's see. Yeah, this is where I'm now doing live coding, which is where things could go very wrong. But we're going to parse float message.payload, and then I don't know. Let's just times it by 100 for the sake of just doing something. So now when I go to this instance, let's clear the debug, and new messages come through. You can now see, rather than the so in the original one, the messages we're getting are every 5 seconds. There we are, 18.92, and in this instance, it's getting, well, thanks to JavaScript's handling of floating point numbers, we get 100 times the value. But the point being, here I could have one NodeRED instance that's doing some data transformation, data cleansing, whatever it might be, and then resending it out to my other NodeRED applications that I want access to that data. So that's something that FlowForge makes it super easy to do, to start building an application made up of lots of NodeREDs that can communicate with each other, share data, and all that sort of thing. I've shown you a little bit, very briefly, the snapshots, and actually if I go dull Arctic turn, that's where we have the snapshot, first set of flows. So there we have the snapshot. Other features we've got in here, you've already seen the NodeRED logs, so you can always see what's going on in NodeRED. The audit log, important record of what people are doing within the team. So you can see all the different types of events, who's logged in, who's deployed changes. You can see who's created snapshots, all that type of stuff. So super important for being able to know what's going on in your team. And we have that audit log both at individual applications, but there's also a team level one, so you can see who's doing things at the team level. Let's look at some of the DevOps type things. What I'm going to do at this point is, so I've got 2 applications. I'm going to create one more. It's all right, it's all going on the company credit card. So let's create a 3rd application. Gifted eyebrowed thrush. There we are. So let's just let him spin up for the first time. But what we're going to treat this one as is, let's say this is our production instance. So we've got between our applications, dull Arctic tern was our original one, the one that's gathering the data. Different lanceolated warbler is the one that's receiving the just receiving the internally sent messages and sharing it. And now we've also got gifted eyebrow thrush, which is something we've not deployed any flows to. So we've talked a lot about DevOps and being able to ease the way that you can move flows from one instance to another. Now, this is something we've got a lot more to come on our roadmap, but already within the platform, what we can do is, if I go back to dull Arctic tern, come to its settings, and then we've got this DevOps option. Well, in fact, I've sort of flicked past. I should show you the settings for NodeRED. We've got a whole bunch of options in here. You can set environment variables against instances, a whole bunch of options on the editor to customize various aspects, security. So NodeRED serves up HTTP endpoints as well. You can set up basic authentication. You can also set it up so that you have to be a FlowForge user to access those HTTP endpoints. And you can manage the palette, install additional modules, all those sorts of things as well. So you can manage a lot of the NodeRED settings directly from our dashboard. But for the DevOps, so this is just a super simple method we have today of saying, right, we're in dialectic turn. I want to push what we've got currently to this new stage. So I can hit push to stage, I can hit confirm. And now what that's doing, if I come over here, you can see gifted eyebrow thrush is now in importing state. So the platform has taken a snapshot of our dialectic turn, and it has importing them and loading them into this instance. So let's just go to the logs. NodeRED is starting up. Just give that a moment or two. There we go, it's on its way up. And once that one is available, there we are. Just wait for it to catch up. So there we are. So now when I open up this instance of NodeRED, it's got exactly the same flows as I had in, dialectic turn. A bit subtle me flipping between them like that, as nothing has changed because they are identical. But the point being, I can now continue developing in this instance of NodeRED, and whenever I want, I can just come back into settings and say, right, take whatever's there and push it to this other instance without having to deal with copying flows around, without doing anything like that. Another aspect we talked about was being able to easily share flows between instances. So let's say this function, let's imagine that this was a super complicated function, lots of business logic, and we want to use it elsewhere. NodeRED, if you're familiar with NodeRED, you'll be familiar with the import and export capabilities and the fact you have a local library. So this is a place where you can save snippets of flows. In FlowForge, you've also got a team library. So I'm going to add into my flows this function node, and I'm going to call this my we're going to call it what? Super powerful function, because that's what it is. And we hit export to library. Now, if I switch to one of our other NodeRED instances, and I bring up the import dialog, I can go to the team library, and there's our super powerful function that I can just import. And now I've brought it in, and I haven't had to copy and paste anything. That's there. I can really easily share flows around. And yeah, that was just one node. It could be a much bigger, it could be a subflow with lots of nodes, lots of configuration. But the key point is that's now in my library. So here we have our team library, and you can see here it is. You can actually get the JSON. So if you did want to be able to copy it out manually, that is available there. But this team library can build up all of the assets you want to easily reuse across your application instances. Devices, I'm just thinking, conscious of time, I can do a quick show and tell on the devices side of things. Let's create, I'm going to change one of my instances. I'm going to go and update my gifted eyebrow thrush. I'm going to edit this one to be, okay, now let's pretend let's make this an application that we want running on our devices. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an inject node, and then I'm going to add, again, the project out node, and we want to send that to, again, it's the same project out node we had before. And this I'm going to send it on a topic called device data. And then we're going to set up this inject node just to inject a time. In fact, no, we won't do a timestamp. We're going to do an environment variable. And we're going to set this to inject every 3 seconds, let's say. One of the things we provide is a bunch of predefined environment variables. So you get project ID and project name. When you deploy to a device, you also get device ID and device name. So what I'm going to do is just copy this environment variable. And if I go back to the right instance, so here we're going to inject FF project ID. In fact, no, we are going to do this with the function node in the interest of time. And again, payload equals, and we are going to build a string which is m.get ff project ID and we're going to also add onto that string m.get ff device ID. Okay, done all that, done all that, done all that. We're going to deploy unused config nodes. Oh, that's fine, because we had, that was the MQT broker node. I'm not, in fact, I am going to clear that because I don't want that when we push to devices. Okay. So now we've got a flow that is going to be pushing out, publishing to our other project, sending it to our different lanceolated warbler on device data. So let's come pull this guy up and pull up device data. I'm just going to mute that top flow. So we should now so here you can see we've got messages arriving with the project ID and the device ID, which is undefined. And it's undefined because this NodeRED isn't running on a device. Okay, but it will be in a moment. So gifted, this is our gifted eyebrowed thrush. Let's go create a snapshot. And we'll call this first flows. And I'm going to tick this box, set as target. And you can already see here, it says this one is deployed to 0 devices. So we've said that this snapshot is the snapshot we want running on any of our devices, but we haven't got any devices yet. So let's go and add a device. So we're going to call this first device. Well, that doesn't matter so much. Key point being, here we've got some credentials, which I've just copied to my clipboard. Now, if I pull up, so on my local laptop, I have a device agent. I'm going to just move my, move that out the way, because that's, oh, I don't want to have to recreate that one. So we dump that configuration. And then once you the replay, all of these credentials will be reset in about half an hour. So, so we've done all that. I'm now going to just run the device agent, if I can do so appropriately. Let's see. So what's going on here is the device agent has now connected to the platform, and it's found out what it should be running, the ID of the snapshot it should be running. It's pulled down the configuration, worked out what needs installing. It has, and then pulled down the flows, and it's now running. So if I go back to differentiator Lancelot and just clear here, you can now see we are receiving 2 sorts of messages. But this one now has the device ID because those messages are coming from my device. And if I added a second device, we would be getting more data here. So you can very quickly start building flows that you push the same set of flows out to lots of devices, but they're all able to report their data back to a single instance. And using the environment variables, you can distinguish where those messages have come from, for example. So that's the devices. Again, with those devices, I can then remove it. So tell it to stop associating this device with this application, which the device agent will get notified and it will stop running those flows. You can see we report on when did we last see the device, what's it running, what snapshot is it currently running. There's a whole bunch of features in the roadmap to improve or to add more features to how you manage devices, but a lot of that capability is there. And let's say, come to the audit log, you can see all this activity I've done around assigning the devices, deploying things, creating snapshots. Yeah, so that's kind of a bit of a whistle-stop tour. Covered a lot of ground of FlowForge. We've got a ton of exciting stuff coming in the roadmap. A lot of the DevOps stuff. The genesis of those ideas are there. You can build your DevOps pipeline between more instances. We've got a ton of plans coming in the future around just making that as seamless process as possible. So yeah, I think with that, conscious of time and conscious I want to get to some of your questions as well, I will switch off.
So, and why don't, and we'll give you a chance to take a glass of water too, Nick, if you'd like, because I know you've been talking a lot. So we've got lots of questions that we'll try and get to as many as possible. Let's kick it off. So for the first one, is there a way of implementing customized remote device names that a customer has, meaning they have a naming convention of their own and that devices need to conform to?
So currently, when you add devices to the platform, the naming is it is freeform, so you can name them however you want. The NodeRED instances, you can. I mean, I was sticking with the platform suggested names. Absolutely, I perhaps should have shown, yes, when you create the application, you can give it whatever name you want. Currently, that name forms part of the URL that you're accessing it to, access it to. But yeah, in the future, we'll provide some more flexibility around what you call the application versus what URL you access it on. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Great, thank you. Has there been testing or experience using FlowForge over slow and latent networks, such as cellular? Any issues with speed and bandwidth usage?
I don't have any specific anecdotal data to share with you, but certainly, I guess it depends what that link is between what and where. So within FlowForge Cloud, the applications are running inside FlowForge Cloud, so the network connectivity issue is kind of more going to be the responsiveness of accessing the NodeRED Editor and all that sort of stuff. If you're talking about devices sending data, so it's all MQTT under the covers, so it is as sufficient as it can be on that regard. Yeah, so I guess it very much depends on
as with any performance question, it depends on the application, isn't it? Right. So, yeah. All right. So, is it possible to use the FlowForge agents on microcontrollers such as the ESP32? So, I believe that's true, but I'll let you answer that question.
Well, so there's a super interesting project in the community to enable running NodeRED flows on microcontrollers. Have a look on the community forum for the NodeRED MCU work. It's pretty new, but it is really fascinating stuff. It's not something we have in FlowForge. So our device agent requires a Node.js runtime to operate. But I think we're certainly keeping an eye on the MCU work by the Moddable company and co to see where that goes. I think it's super interesting to see the work and how quickly and how far that's gone. So yeah, we don't have anything for that today, but we're certainly watching what the NodeRED community does in that area.
Okay. I've tested FlowForge local PC with a Raspberry Pi. They work great. Excellent tool. My question is, how many devices for the device management do you support in local and in the cloud?
We don't have a sort of a technical limit for the open source version. I believe we limit it to 50 devices before you sort of run into needing a license to access the premium version. And on FlowForge Cloud, there is no limit. There is a cost associated with the devices you want to attach to your platform, but there is no limit to how many you could connect to your applications.
Okay. And I think we've seen like kind of companies using hundreds of devices so far. So, so we've got good confidence it will scale up. A question about NodeRED: is it possible to manage multiple users to access the UI and for the flow to identify each user and act differently?
So the certainly editor, you can have when you access the editor, it knows who's accessing it from your FlowForge team. So all the audit logging as to who's changed what is maintained. But the runtime side doesn't really have the concept of users. The flows are just running. The user model is much more in the editor time experience. Now, there are dashboard plugins like NodeRED Dashboard and others that do let you build a UI that backed by your NodeRED flows. The different dashboarding solutions offer different approaches to users, and that's from none to a bit. There isn't the dashboard in question could be another hours-long topic. We did publish recently a blog post examining some of the key differences and similarities between some of the more popular dashboarding projects of NodeRED. So I recommend go have a look at that on the FlowForge blog to see some of our details on that.
Actually, I'll put a link to that blog post in the chat after I read you
Awesome.
the next question. If I had 5 small instances, and this is a pricing question, so FlowForge Cloud, 5 small instances on FlowForge Cloud, is it still $15 US per month?
Yes. So in FlowForge Cloud, which is our hosted instance of our platform, we charge $15 a month per NodeRED instance. For the small instance, we also have medium and large, each one giving you more memory and CPU at a commensurate cost. But yes, so it is $15 a month per NodeRED instance. If you sign up, you do get a free trial for 1 month. So very much try before you buy type approach. So you can have a play and understand the capabilities of the platform without having to do anything with your credit card.
Let's say we started with a small instances. Can we monitor the instance performance to decide if we need to upgrade? So I guess how do people decide for small, medium, large?
Sure. Well, so on the monitoring front, that's not something we have today, but having better observability of the platform is certainly something we want in the roadmap. So watch this space on that one. But I think there's a lot you can do with a small instance is kind of our experience.
And I think kind of with our support too, we kind of guide you through that too. If you're hitting kind of questions like that, I think we could actually kind of reach out to our support team and we can certainly guide you through that. That scenarios too. So how can I manage multiple developers in the same flow tab at the same time using Git flow integration? So
we don't currently have concurrent editing in NodeRED, and this is kind of a NodeRED thing rather than a FlowForge thing, but it is something we are looking at and something we want to be able to support, and it's a good example of something where we in FlowForge are certainly going to look at how can we enable that and what can we push upstream into NodeRED to help the broader community. So yeah, there are some interesting usability challenges around trying to get that Google Docs level of collaboration. But yeah, it is very much something we've got. It's on our radar, and it's one of those features I'm really itching to get stuck into. But yeah, unfortunately it has to wait its turn for amongst all the other items we have in our backlog.
So we keep on going through these. Can library flows be updated? Do they automatically update in each instance?
So you can save updated versions to the library to overwrite what's already there. It doesn't automatically propagate that out to the NodeRED instances that have imported. Again, that's one of those features in NodeRED I've long wanted to try and find an approach to, but we've never quite found a suitable approach. So yeah, I recognize that as a really desirable feature, and all I could say is that, watch this space, or if it's something you're interested in collaborating on in the NodeRED community, please do get in touch with us in the community.
Is it possible to have more than one user password with different authentication for running applications?
So at the moment, we are kind of limited by what NodeRED offers. So when you set up security on your HTTP endpoints, it is either a single hard-coded username and password, which is what NodeRED has long since offered, or you can enable FlowForge-based authentication, which means to access the HTTP endpoints, it verifies you're authenticated with the FlowForge platform before giving you access. Having richer authentication options is certainly desirable, and again, let's see where that goes. But at least being able to tie it to your FlowForge authentication, if you're wanting to host a dashboard for your own use, then that you can secure a dashboard using your FlowForge credentials, and you log in and it bounces you to the FlowForge platform, you log in and it bounces you back to the dashboard, and it all just works, which is lovely.
Great. Okay. Is there a sign-off like a pull request between instances? How can you prevent pushing the wrong instance to prod?
So at the moment, we don't really have any guardrails. We've got sort of the raw capability of creating the snapshot and then being able to pick, assign what gets pushed where. But as I've mentioned, we've got a lot in store for the DevOps feature, making the pipelines much more intuitive and a much improved user experience. So it feels much more seamless. And certainly some of the points you make there, the sort of the guardrails you want around that will be an important thing for us to factor into the design work we do.
Sure. My guess is the next question is kind of going to be a similar question, but I think these are good questions for us to kind of, what's important for you guys, kind of for people, we can kind of learn a lot from these questions. How can you manage credentials between staging and prod? For example, MongoDB credentials or MySQL credentials using CI/CD. So
that's where environment variables come in. So NodeRED has great support for using environment variables to configure any node property. And then I showed you briefly, via the FlowForge dashboard, you can then set environment variables against that NodeRED instance. So where you have your testing instance and your production instance, whilst they might have identical flows, they can have different environment variable values. So you would provide your test credentials to one and your production credentials to the other, and then you can deploy the same flows to both, but they will connect to the different systems based on those environment variables.
Great. Okay. And we really want to try and go through some of these fast because we're going to run out of time. But can we see what the device agent looks like? Is it a CLI app or a daemon? Maybe can you just quickly explain kind of what?
Yeah, absolutely. So the device agent is it is a Node.js app. So yes, it's CLI, you can run it, but we do provide a service file so it can run as the systemd service, a Docker container, so you can run it as a Docker image, whatever you want. But at its core, it's just a Node.js application you can run, and that does the work to manage it.
Okay. Can FlowForge allow me to control multi-user development of the same NodeRED application, checkout, commit? And can this be done out of Flow kind of tab granularity?
So we don't have tab level granularity of what gets committed at the moment. It's kind of the whole set of flows. You can, with snapshots, you can sort of roll back and go back in history, much like you could with a Git repository. It isn't Git at the moment, so there is no connection between the FlowForge snapshots and a Git repository. But yeah, certainly we're looking at what are the other sorts of capabilities we want to add in that area.
Nick, are you okay? We'll spend like kind of 3 more minutes.
I'm happy to keep going with these. I'd much rather get your questions answered whilst we're on a roll if
okay.
everyone else
okay.
is.
Okay. Do you want to take another glass of water while?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Okay. Can you open and edit the flow of a device locally? Since it's running on your laptop, could you go to localhost and make changes?
So our model is the device instance of NodeRED, we actually disable the editor. So it can't be edited locally because you want the single source of truth of what it's running being the snapshot that's deployed to it. That said, work happening at the moment, which might get into our next release, or it might be the release after, we are intending to allow you to, via the FlowForge dashboard, edit flows running on a device. So you can access the editor on a device via the FlowForge dashboard, even if, like if you're on FlowForge Cloud, even if that device is running on your home network or wherever it might be, we are looking to provide an editing experience of a device via the FlowForge platform without, even if you can't get direct access to the device with a web browser. So that is something that's coming because we see that's important for debugging. I will say something I haven't demoed. We also provide a plugin for NodeRED for when you're running NodeRED completely outside of FlowForge. There is a FlowForge plugin for NodeRED that lets you connect any NodeRED instance to your FlowForge platform, and you can actually create a snapshot of your flows that are running locally and push them up into your FlowForge instance. So if you're developing for a device and you actually need to develop with real hardware, you can do that with a vanilla NodeRED with the FlowForge plugin installed. And when you're happy, create a snapshot and push that up into the FlowForge platform and have FlowForge then push that back out to your real devices. So that is a workflow that is possible.
Great. Actually, this person's kind of, I think, incorporated about four questions into one. So so is there any CI/CD pipeline integration available with FlowForge?
So we don't have any integration with sort of external pipeline tools. Right now, we're kind of focused on how we can build those workflows and pipelines within the FlowForge platform. But certainly longer term, looking at what makes sense in terms of integrations with other tools to really make a much bigger ecosystem than any one tool will be an interesting thing to look at. But right now we're focused on building the CI/CD type workload within the platform itself.
Okay. Actually, I'm not even sure what IAC module to provision user application in FlowForge. I'm not sure what IAC is, but you might know.
I believe so. No, I would be guessing. So
okay,
but,
so let's go on to the next one. So
yeah.
So if the person wants to kind of send me an email afterwards, we can follow up with that question.
Yeah.
Is there any rebranding option in FlowForge? So if we use self-hosted, the premium one, so that kind of we're seeing some companies interested in actually hosting FlowForge themselves and kind of incorporate it into their NodeRED solution. So do we offer a rebranding for FlowForge Premium?
Not at the moment. And that is purely, I would say that is certainly a point in time statement. I think the more interest we have from people interested in being able to self-host and also rebrand, that will certainly help with the prioritization, should I say. So please, if that's something that's of interest to you, please do reach out to Ian or myself, and we'd love to have that conversation to understand your exact requirements.
Yeah, and I think that goes for a lot of these questions. Like we're a young company. We're really trying to work very closely with our leading customers. And so if you're interested, please reach out, and we'd love to kind of better understand your use cases and your requirements, and how we can collaborate together. So we're going to kind of keep on going. So performance and pricing seem a little loose. How do you understand when to use small, medium, large? And we already talked about monitoring. We don't actually provide monitoring yet, right? But can you provide a bit of guidance on kind of to start out kind of between small, medium, large?
Yeah. So, well, I did mention briefly that sort of observability monitoring is something to come. I don't have a particular outlook on that, but yes, we recognize that is quite important. One of the challenges is obviously, it depends so much on what you're doing in your flows and what type of workload you need to be able to do. So, a small instance, it's 256 meg of RAM. It's a proportion of a single CPU. I have gone blank on what the medium and large numbers are, but they're sort of incrementally larger. Start small and work your way up. So the platform does support you migrating from between the types of types of instance. So you can upgrade an existing project from small to medium if you so want. So, but yeah, I think this observability monitoring topic does come up quite a bit. So I think that is something we need to.
And again, yeah, and I would stress, like, kind of in the meantime, please reach out to our support team, and they can certainly help you kind of with your sizing, and if you're ready into kind of performance limitations. What is the standard way would you recommend to communicate NodeRED service running on the edge with FlowForge instance in the cloud?
So certainly the project nodes I gave that brief demo hides a lot of the detail of how to make that work. Yes, it's MQTT under the covers, but it kind of just tries to simplify the configuration so you don't have to worry too much about it. That's the model we provide, and that is what we'd recommend. Otherwise, if you wanted to build your own solution using your own MQTT broker, that would be awesome as well. That would just work. We created those project nodes to try and make it a seamless user experience for configuring inter-instance communication. So, I think that is what we would suggest.
Okay. When will there be an option for using the min editor on devices? Example for end-to-end test.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, that is something we are looking at for either the next release or the one after, being able to edit flows remotely on a device. But there's some, aside from the technical, there's also just trying to work out the workflows around that and how that breaks this idea of the snapshot being the single source of truth once you can start changing what's on a device. So yeah, there's some challenges around that. But again, if you have use cases in mind, please do share so we can make sure we're building something that works for you as well as us.
Okay. We're going to take 2 more questions, then we're going to call it a day because we're way over time, but these have been great questions. I think they're it's really important to kind of hear what people are thinking about when they learn about FlowForge. So when you have multiple device agents, can you have multiple device agents running on the same device? May I have the same flows that I want running on one thread, or some other core that I want to separate from other functionality?
Yes, so you can register 2 devices. So each device agent is one device as far as the platform's concerned. But if you register 2 devices, they can be running on the same bit of hardware. You do need to, by default, it will use port 1880 as NodeRED does. You just need to make sure each device agent is using a different port for where it's listening. But you can run as many copies of the device agent on one machine. I mean, I think in my local testing, I know I've been into double figures of device agents running on my laptop whilst testing this stuff. So absolutely, you can do that.
Okay, the last question for the project nodes, where is the MQTT broker hosted?
So that's the broker is part of the FlowForge platform. So in FlowForge Cloud, it's one of the services within the platform. If you're self-hosting in the Docker or Kube environments, just one of the containers that forms part of the platform is that broker, and it's with all of the security applied around it to ensure only all the access control and authentication authorization. It's at this point, it isn't a broker intended for general use, if that makes sense. It's kind of a broker used by the FlowForge project nodes and internal pieces of the FlowForge platform. So it's not a generic MQTT broker that you can get a username and password on within your flows at this stage. But yeah.
All right. Okay. So Nick, thank you very much. I just want to, maybe I'll just kind of wrap up with the getting started. So I think there's three couple ways you can get started. Sign up for FlowForge Cloud. As Nick's mentioned, we offer the first month free. So we big believer try it before you commit. We do open source. FlowForge is an open source project, so there's a link to download it, and you can certainly self-host it yourself. If you do want to upgrade to more with the support, the unlimited instances and team members, we do offer a premium version. Also would welcome anyone to book a demo. We could be happy to take you through a private walkthrough of FlowForge and answer your specific questions based on your use case. So please just reach out to this email address that we have, and we're happy to walk you through FlowForge in more detail. So Nick, do you have any closing comments before we close down the webinar?
No, I think thank you everyone for joining. It's been great to see so many of you join, interested in seeing what we're doing. I will throw forward to I think a couple of weeks' time, we've got our next NodeRED Ask Me Anything session. Yeah. So another opportunity for you guys to come along and ask lots of questions of myself and colleagues around what we're doing, both NodeRED questions, but also FlowForge questions. So keep an eye out for that in a couple of weeks' time. Otherwise, please reach out to us directly if you have questions you want to follow up on. I'm always happy to talk to people.
Yeah, and when we close down the webinar, you'll be asked to fill out a survey, and please, I think there's 3 questions. It's great to give us feedback on these webinars, so we can look to improve on them in the future. But thank you, Nick, again. It was great. Thank you, everyone, for the great questions. It's great to have the interest and the insight that we're learning from everyone. So as Nick said, we have the Ask Me Anything sessions on April 13th, and we'll definitely be sending out information about that. So have a great day, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.